I think the starting point for this discussion is, how did we even get here? How did we get to a point that our Prime Minister invoked the Emergencies Act, previously known as the War Measures Act? Now, to give context to the gravity of this, the War Measures Act was invoked only 3 times: during World War I, during World War II, and during the FLQ crisis. The Emergencies Act has never been invoked until now. So what is it? An act to authorize the taking of special temporary measures to ensure safety and security during national emergencies and to amend other acts in consequence thereof. Leah West, the Associate Director of the prestigious Norm Patterson School of International Affairs and the Assistant Professor for International Affairs, National Security Law, Counterterrorism, and Cyber Operations, has recently been featured in a CBC article regarding the Emergency Act. And she said, to invoke a national emergency, the government would need to be saying that these protests threaten the security of Canada, our sovereignty, or our territorial integrity. I have real concerns, she says, about fudging the legal thresholds to invoke the most powerful federal law that we have. If you were to take home anything from what I'm speaking about tonight, I think it is that quote right there. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association said, the Emergencies Act can only be invoked when a situation seriously threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada, and when the situation cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada. They went on to say, governments regularly deal with difficult situations and do so using powers granted to them by democratically elected representatives. Emergency legislation should not be normalized. It threatens our democracy and our civil liberties. So, back to my original question. How did we get to this point? Let's go back 21 days and ask, how did we get to a point that so many Canadians got so angry that they mobilized across the country, drove thousands of miles, spent thousands of dollars just to be heard?
Dernière, les ministres provinciaux
and will not open city-owned spray parks.
As of today, only fully vaccinated passengers will be allowed to board most planes and some trains in this country.
200,000 Canadian small businesses could disappear forever.
Not comply with vaccine passports can face a penalty of up to $10 million. But
this policy measure is intended.
This driver is unvaccinated and says she will lose her job over this.
Protesting takes different levels of commitment. You can sign a petition, you can join a social media group, or you can mobilize. Mobilizing takes another level of commitment. So what has happened to make people so frustrated that they have mobilized across this country? The other day, I was walking to my office in Confederation Building, and for those who know Ottawa, it was a very cold Ottawa day, about minus 25. It was freezing. And I walked down Wellington and I saw the trucks. And I just want to say I've walked this since the day I started, as a female, by myself, and never felt unsafe. And as I walked, I thought to myself, they must want to go home. So I asked. I stopped and asked one of the truckers, do you want to be here? Don't you want to go home? And you know what they said to me? Yes, of course we do. But no one is listening to us. I remember on the first few days of the protest, walking to Parliament Hill and speaking with police on the ground. They were polite and engaging. The police have been fantastic. If we could get a round of applause for them. Yeah. I asked them how they were managing, and they said, pretty well. They told me this protest was nothing like Caledonia. They told me they've been working protests for decades, and force always escalates a protest. They said force never works for a peaceful resolution. They said the number one thing that works is when protesters are heard. They asked me if I knew why the Prime Minister refused to acknowledge them. I told them I wondered the exact same thing. So, just for fun, I thought I'm going to Google crisis management tactics, just to see what Google had to say. Of course, a top 7 useful tactics list popped up, and I'm going to share them with you. Number 1, tell the truth. Number 2, own it and speak from the heart. Number 3, have a plan. Number 4, provide a respectful response. Number 5, use the moment as a learning tool. Number 6, say the same thing to everyone. Number 7, take all stakeholders into account. Now, the Prime Minister has a lot more tools at his disposal than Google, and yet he still jumped to invoking the Emergencies Act before using the simplest of tools. I don't know that any of those 7 tactics have been used by the Prime Minister. Last Thursday, February 10th, the Conservative Party put forth a motion in the House asking for a plan. Communication, transparency. And the Liberal government, who's been over-speaking my entire speech and has no respect clearly for the House, voted no. Canadians want and deserve clear and transparent communication. If you don't want to listen to me, leave. On Monday, during a press conference, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Some people will say that we moved too quickly. Other people will say no. We should have acted weeks ago. The reality is this. The Emergencies Act is not something to take lightly. It's not the first thing you turn to, nor the second, nor the third. So I asked the Prime Minister to please tell Canadians what the first, second, and third actions were that he took before invoking the Emergencies Act. I, along with the rest of Canada, is still waiting for an answer. The relationships that have been destroyed in the country may never be rebuilt. The division, segregation, and stigmatization has deeply and negatively impacted Canadians. There has been countless opportunities for the leader of the country to unite Canadians, but instead of bringing us together, our Prime Minister says things like this, quote, "They are extremists who don't believe in science, they're often misogynists, also often racist," said Trudeau. "It's a small group that muscles in, and we have to make a choice in terms of leaders, in terms of the country. Do we tolerate these people?" Those are the Prime Minister's words. This is a far cry from the Prime Minister we can quote from 2015 when he won, and he said, and I quote, "A positive, optimistic, hopeful vision of public life isn't a naive dream. It can be a powerful force for change. And if Canadians are to trust their government needs to trust Canadians." Where is that Prime Minister? Where did he go? Our office has received thousands and thousands of emails and messages from very scared and confused constituents. Some of the messages I've received today alone are the following. People are very concerned about the serious misuse of power and the overreach of federal government. One constituent sobbed on the phone that she's frightened and can't sleep because it reminds her of the October crisis. Another constituent phoned in because he feared he would be arrested if he spoke in public in our local community. People have phoned in very concerned that the Act is already being implemented and that this debate is purely window dressing. The general public is confused as to the extent of the powers and that there is no check on the government's implementation. People are afraid that their bank accounts will be frozen, not because they donated, but because they have supported the truckers on social media. Constituents are worried that if they donated even $50, that their account will be frozen and forever jeopardize their credit rating. What are the facts that make the government believe that the blockades are associated with the threat of serious violence for an ideological purpose? What is the legal basis for this extreme action by government? A constituent wrote to me right before I spoke tonight, and he told me that he received a scam email that his account has been frozen. Has the government acknowledged that this Emergencies Act may have opened the door for fraud, and innocent Canadians to be further traumatized? Another constituent wrote to me and said, I'm a senior. I'm a senior, Michelle. I can't pay for my food. I can't pay for my mortgage. Why isn't the government dealing with this? How did we get here? What are the first, second, and third actions that were taken before invoking the Emergencies Act? I formerly worked in media, and it has been unbelievable to see the silos of information that people are getting. And I actually think it is one of the biggest contributing factors to the division that we are seeing in this country. And there is a really big discussion that needs to happen about media and the information that is being released to the public. How did we get to a point where each person thinks they are so right and they are so divided? And it comes back to the leadership at the very top. When you have a leader telling Canadians that some of the people in this country are bad people, you divide people. And that is the biggest problem we have in this country. We are no longer united, we are divided.